Chapter 19. Crinan, the Cheater. The Third Hell. Sincroft.
"Let her go,"
another voice ordered. From the ground, Crinan watched as Malinka disappeared down the street.
"We're here for him. Hey, shithead, face on the ground. What about that do you not understand?"
"Let me go," Crinan growled as his face was smashed into the cobblestone street. "What do you want?"
"You're under arrest, terrorist,"
the first voice yelled at Crinan. "For what?" Crinan furiously replied. He tried to wriggle free, but the Govian slapped him in the back of the head and pushed his knee harder into Crinan's back.
"Alteration of core system mechanics, and you as a prisoner are suspected of conspiring with a terrestrial party. Now, shut your bitch mouth and hold still so I can get these cuffs on you."
"Ah, okay," Crinan said, rolling his eyes. "Here, let me open my butthole for you, too." At that, and with all the strength he had in him, he rolled to his back, throwing the Govian off balance. Crinan scrambled backward, bumping into Ander and the Govian that had neutralized him, and felt the barrel of a pistol smack him against the side of the head. For a moment, Crinan was stunned, unable to properly move his body, and then he heard gunshots. The world around him was a blur, and he could barely make out the frenzied movement. Complete magazines of small-caliber munitions were discharged, and then he heard shouting, growling, and sounds of tearing. After a few moments, Crinan's blurry vision consolidated, and he was able to see clearly again. He looked around him to find a few dead touched, and the rest feasting on the fallen bodies of the Govians that had attacked him. "Damn it all!" Karsten angrily shouted into Crinan's ear. He felt the elf's strong hand seize him and lift him to his feet. "Get up, you little shit! Come on!" Crinan felt a warm trickle down the side of his face and instinctively reached up to touch it. He pulled his hand back for inspection and saw more blood than he expected. Confused, he looked around and saw Ander standing over the bodies of the mangled Govian soldiers. "'Tis uncommon for these people to show up," Ander contemplated contemplatively. "They generally only appear when conflict between players needs solving. That they would show up to arrest us, as they said, is a very curious event." Ander twisted the tip of his mustache and paced back and forth. "Truly, Crinan, your claims must have some sort of truth to them if these soldiers are here." "They're Govians," Crinan said, keeping pressure on his wounded head. "Inquisitors. Militarized police force. Judge, jury, and executioner on the streets of the major cities of Duran." "Intriguing," Ander said. Crinan thought the vampire was going to twist his mustache clean off if he kept fucking with it. "I do wish I knew more about the current era, but, alas, I barely remember my own." "Yeah, well," Crinan grunted as he took a few pained steps forward. "Not really much time for that. Malinka ran off. We have to find her. We also have to get the fuck out of here. That Govian said—" The sound of rapid gunfire interrupted Crinan, and he watched as multiple touched fell to the ground, dead. "Find cover!" Crinan shouted as he started to run, keeping his head low. He passed Ander and Karsten and barely registered the bullets ricocheting off his armor. He was being targeted heavily, and he watched as his chest armor flickered and disappeared from existence, leaving only the dingy shirt he had on beneath. Crinan didn't even have time to think before multiple rounds pierced his back and exploded out his chest. He fell to the ground, crashing face first into the cobblestone. "Burnt iron cuirass destroyed. Effects removed. Shields, 0 of 225. HP, 10 of 190. You are bleeding. Death is imminent." "By the brothers," Crinan painfully choked. "This is fucking bullshit." Connection established. User, Virginius. User, Pretty Kitty, 6969420. Blood Games, version 666.3. Hellscape by Farseer. System override. emhealrecent.sli execute. Error. emhealrecent.sli not compatible. emhealrecent2.sli execute. Script accepted. Please wait. emhealrecent2.sli executed. User Pretty Kitty 6969420 health status full. emshieldrecent.sli execute. Script accepted. Please wait. emshieldrecent.sli executed. User Pretty Kitty 6969420 shield status full. /ispawn119 execute. Error. Command failed. You do not have sufficient permissions. /su execute. Error. Command failed. You do not have sufficient permissions. /susm execute. Error. Command failed. You do not have sufficient permissions. User Virginius terminated due to 3 failed commands. Connection closed. User Virginius physical location logged. Location Isla Axi. Location Belhas. Location error data corrupt. Error track log 323-423-432-2222-9345.tex does not exist. Connection established. User Luke Links 3. User Pretty Kitty 6969420 /su execute. Command accepted. Super user mode enabled. /ispawn119 4423200142392 inventory quantity 2 execute. Command accepted. Item 119 quantity 2 added to user 4423200142392 inventory /ispawn219 4423200142392 inventory quantity 600 execute. Command accepted. Item 229 quantity 600 added to user 4423200142392 inventory /refresh blueprint user pretty 6969420 error command failed user not recognized /refresh blueprint user pretty kitty 6969420 command accepted. User Pretty Kitty 6969420 blueprint refreshed. /lscan user Luke Links 3. User Luke Links 3 disconnected. Connection closed. lscan failed. User not found.
Krynan's pain faded as if it had never been there in the first place. The strange green text disappeared from his vision and he quickly got to his feet. Bullets pinged off his body, but he barely even felt them. He suddenly seemed impervious to damage. He looked down at his hands and noticed they glowed with the blue shield light, and he also noticed 2 revolvers laying on the ground in front of him, and an ammo belt around his waist. None of those items had been there before he fell.
Sage, Krynan whispered as the weapons found their way into his hands. Back home, Krynan, his sword, and his revolver composed the triptych that had spelled out the end to so many of his enemies' lives. With a skilled fluidity and grace that he had honed over many years of practice, experience, and instruction under some of the best he could find, once Krynan found his groove in battle, he at times could be nearly unstoppable. Except that time that he was stopped and ended up in the hells. Shield augmentation applied. Shields 500 of 220. HP restored. HP 190 of 190. Items found. Rusty O Westy. Revolver. Plus 0.1 to damage output. Item equipped in weapon slot 2. Rusty O Westy. Revolver. Plus 1 to damage output. Item equipped in weapon slot 3. Boiled leather ammo belt. Dispenses ammunition for firearms, plus 5 shields. Revolver ammunition times 600. Ammunition for revolver. Revolver ammunition stored in ammo belt.
Krynan had no idea what had just happened, but due to the text he saw earlier, he imagined Sage and Lucas had something to do with it. He got to his feet and didn't waste any time raising the revolvers in front of him. The Govians kept firing their carbines, but their fire rate had slowed, and looks of surprise and sudden terror spread over their faces. Krynan took aim and squeezed the triggers. The first bullet found its home in the chest of a Govian directly in front of Krynan. Krynan swung his pistol to the right, fired another shot, and promptly dropped another. In a single fluid motion, and using the momentum of the recoil from his first shot, his left arm curled over his scalp, the top of the pistol gently caressing the right side of his head, and then he straightened his arm so that the weapon was aimed at one of the two Govians directly to his left. As he fired, he pivoted his body, once again using the force from the recoil, and fired the pistol in his right hand only a fraction of a second later. The two Govians fell backwards clumsily, leaving only one Govian left. Krynan's 180-degree spin concluded with him firing 2 shots from his left revolver and 2 shots from his right. Bullets perforated the Govian's body and the carbine flew from his hands as he momentarily danced in place from the impact of the projectiles. As the being's back hit the ground, Krynan stepped forward and stood over him. "Why are you here?" Krynan asked, kneeling. He shoved the barrel of one of the revolvers up under the person's chin and frowned. "Who sent you?"
"Fuck you, rebel!"
The Govian hissed back between groans.
"We will never talk."
Krynan fired his pistol, relieving the Govian of his brains, and stood up, turning to the other 4 Inquisitors he had shot. One was in the process of clumsily getting to his feet, and Krynan shot him in the ribs. He quickly walked toward the soldier and stood over him. "Why are you here?" Krynan's voice was sterner, and the writhing Govian looked up at him and spit a glob of blood in his direction. Without hesitation, Krynan shot the Inquisitor in his forehead and turned to another. "Why are you here?" The query continued, Krynan growing angrier with each Govian he visited. He had 1 bullet left in each of his guns and 3 Govians remaining. The one he stood over looked up at him, trembling, with tears in his eyes and arms extended, silently begging for mercy.
"Keep quiet, Ishan,"
one of the other downed Govians roared. Without looking, Krynan reached out, the pistol in his right hand, and silenced the shouting Govian. He noticed that despite all the killing he was doing, he wasn't receiving any ranking gains. He then knelt and held the barrel of the pistol in his left hand against the Govian's lips. "Do you want to die?" Krynan growled, tapping the barrel against the being's exposed teeth. "I don't care about you. I don't care about anyone in your fucking country. I want to know, why are you here?"
The
Govian whispered. His voice was trembling. He was terrified.
"I have a child. Please."
Krynan snorted, but didn't pull the trigger. Thoughts of his own father flashed through his mind like lightning. And in his moment of hesitation, the 2 surviving Govians suddenly vanished. Looking back and forth between where they had laid, Krynan sighed and stood to his feet. Govian Inquisitors in the Hells, and they didn't give ranking when they died. The thought of it was concerning. Players were problematic enough, but trained Govian police and soldiers, that was a thought that concerned Krynan greatly, and even more concerning was the fact that they had suddenly vanished. Krynan surmised that the Govian lockdown didn't apply to people Govia specifically sent in. Typical. All throughout his latter teenage years and into his 20s, Krynan had faced off against the Govian military. Never in full-scale war, always in guerrilla or ambush-style situations as was common with Century Squad. Krynan had been shot, stabbed, blown up, and beaten to a pulp in his time, but a Govian had never had the pleasure of taking his life. Despite that fact, however, the Govian military was not to be trifled with. Krynan had never personally fought Govia's heavily augmented special forces, the Spectres as they were called, or the Inquisition's Reapers in their power armor. He had seen them before, but senior members of Century Squad, Captain Bran or Sergeants Mace, Caven, or Marca, had fought them. Krynan remembered watching one of Century's former sergeants, Cars, fight against and lose his head to a Govian Spectre. Krynan had only fought the grunts that made up the bulk of the Govian military. The soldiers he had just killed were exactly that, grunts. He knew that it was the duty of every Govian adult to serve 5 years in one of the branches of the military. The grunts were Govia's citizenry, young people between the ages of 20 and 25. Any soldier older than that was in the military by choice, and they were always a greater threat.
"Why can't we log out?"
Crinan heard the disembodied voice of one of the dead Govians shout.
I can't leave!
Crinan smiled at this revelation. Govia could send them in and pull them out when they desired, but if they died in the hells, they were stuck there like any other player.
Shut up, Damron!
Another yelled.
Let's just figure this out!
Crinan thought over the implications of what was going on. It was his general understanding that for someone to enter the hells without dying, they had to somehow log in, based on the terminology he had heard thus far. He wondered what logging in meant. Was it some kind of magic? Did some mage have to cast some sort of spell that sent their Nane, as he had heard it called, to where he was? His head ached as he tried to wrap his mind around all of it.
I've had about enough of this shit for one day,
Karsten blurted, snapping Crinan out of his thoughts.
I got half a mind to turn around right now. Y'all got those Govian fellas chasing you down? Apparently,
Crinan replied, immediately dismissing Karsten's words.
We need to find Malinka, though, and then get to the Croft Keeper, and get the fuck out of this city. Come on.
Malinka Immel, the only daughter of Commander Dorax Immel of Camelot, leaned against a moist brick wall, resting for a moment after running from the ambush. She knew she would be no good to anyone with her face mushed against the ground. She hated the thought of running away, but they were outnumbered and outgunned.
Guns.
Malinka spat, shaking her head.
Govians in the hells with guns. This fucking place just keeps getting more and more ridiculous.
She rubbed the back of her neck with a free hand and couldn't help but heavily sigh at the position she had found herself in.
Fucking hate this shit.
She pounded her fist against the wall and then rested her forehead against the brick. Tears slowly crept down her cheeks as she thought of all that she had experienced thus far. The many deaths, the brutality, the rape and torture and pain. Everything she thought she was had been broken down, destroyed, and it seemed that nothing was left of the strong vice-commander that she had once been. How then, she thought, was she to save anyone else? How was she to save Crinan?
Of all the people on the planet,
she whispered.
Why him? Why did he have to be the one to save me? Why is he here?
She couldn't lie to herself and say she was disappointed. The very sight of him had exhumed feelings she hadn't fully felt since she was a teenager.
He's a shithead,
she whispered.
They're all shitheads. I agree,
a voice said from behind her.
All males are bastards.
Malinka quickly spun, raising one of her axes and holding the blade against the neck of a petite Ferris behind her. The shoeless, dirty, pink-haired female adorned in torn rags and a belly shirt stood smiling.
Who are you?
Malinka hissed. It was one of the few occasions where she had heard any of the denizens of the hells speak.
What are you doing here? I have come to help you,
the Ferris said plainly.
Surely you remember me.
I've never met you before in my life,
Malinka spat back. The dusty Ferris smiled warmly and reached up, gently pushing the axe aside.
We met long ago in the forest of Woolshire Highlands of Camelot. I found you there, alone and afraid, separated from the boy you loved. It was my job to either capture or kill you, but I did neither. I reported to my superiors that I could not find you. Do you remember what I told you?
What?
Malinka asked, dumbfounded. A memory of exactly that flashed through her mind. She stared at the Ferris, not recognizing her features or her voice. The Govian female who had spared her so long ago had been an elf with red hair. The Ferris reached behind her and produced a blue beret, one that Govian junior officers wore. She placed the beret atop her matted hair, and for a moment the color of her eyes turned green, and her hair flashed a dark red.
Do you remember now, my friend?
The Ferris asked, taking a step closer.
Do you remember what I told you? He will find you,
Malinka whispered.
Protect him.
The Ferris smiled and nodded.
I am here with you,
she said.
This avatar is a sort of proxy for my presence. I am here, and I am not. I have seen what Krynan is trying to accomplish, and I have, for the most part, hidden it from the rest of Govia.
Why?
Malinka asked, dumbfounded.
Why would you care to do such a thing?
Because, like you, I love that boy.
The Ferris said, pausing for Malinka to absorb her words.
Malinka, I know your thoughts. I know how you feel. For I, too, have been imprisoned, tortured, forced upon. This world is not kind to us.
Malinka stared at the Ferris for a moment, listening to her words and examining her expressions. She could have sliced into her neck, hacked her head free from its body. She didn't have to believe a word that was being said, but something compelled her to.
Who are you?
Malinka whispered, letting her axe fall to her side.
Why do you love him?
The Ferris smiled warmly and reached up, gently and supportively grabbing Malinka's shoulder.
Because he is my brother, Malinka.
The Ferris whispered in response.
And I am all that is protecting you two from Govia learning the extent of your cooperation with the Lifelinks remnant. I see what's being planned. I see the culmination of power in the 7th level. If you get there, you will escape.
What is your name?
Malinka whispered. The Ferris hesitated for a moment and then reached up, gently caressing Malinka's cheek.
I am Bishop General Saracen Fear of the Govian Empire, and I am here to ensure that Saginius Lynx is successful. And for now I must go. Keep my avatar safe. Take her with you. I will return to you soon.